Be careful then, dear brothers and sisters. Make sure that your own hearts are not evil and unbelieving, turning you away from the living God. You must warn each other every day while it is still today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against God. For if we are faithful to the end, trusting God just as firmly as when we first believed, we will share in all that belongs to Christ. Remember what it says. Today, when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts, as Israel did when they rebelled. And who was it who rebelled against God, even though they heard his voice? Wasn't it the people Moses led out of Egypt? And who made God angry for 40 years? Wasn't it the people who sinned, whose corpses lay in the wilderness? And whom was God speaking when he took an oath that they would never enter his rest? Wasn't it the people who disobeyed him? So we see that because of their unbelief, they were not able to enter his rest. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good morning, Sojourn. Peace be with you. You may be seated, Gage. There's one in every service that holds on. Everybody used to stay standing up, and then somewhere during COVID we stopped. I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal. It was cool, though, when we were all kind of doing it together. So, Gage, you're the last cool person in our church. Congratulations. Well, good morning. My name is Jonah. I'm one of the pastors here at Sojourn, and it's good to be with you. Our mission as a church is to reach people with the good news of who Jesus is and what he's done, build them up as his church, and send his church to follow him into his world. Reach, build, send. That's what we do here. A couple of quick things before getting into Hebrews 3 this morning. We're nearing the end of the year, which is kind of hard to believe. 2022 is almost over, and some of you participate in year-end giving. Every year there's some folks that maybe you haven't give all year, and you're like, I'm ready to give now. Some people, their pay structures, they get bonuses at the end of the year, and so we try to bring an opportunity or something that you can participate in at the end of the year if you're interested in that. And this year we got a double B situation at our church. I screwed it up in the first one, so I'm going to make sure I get it right. Buildings and bonuses. Buildings and bonuses. And maybe you're like, oh man, when I woke up this morning, I was hoping to be inspired to give buildings and bonuses. Well, here's just some of the reality of life in the church right now. If you've been at our church for a while, you've seen that our giving has just gone down over the last few years. I said this a couple of weeks ago. Churches over 500 in attendance on average saw half of their congregations leave from 2020 on. And so we've experienced similar numbers to that here. And if you're a member, you're going to get a budget proposal put before you in a couple of weeks. And what that shows is basically the only thing left to cut after this next budget is people. And we're trying really hard not to cut people. And so if you've been on staff at Sojourn over the last 3 years, you haven't gotten a raise. And there's just not very many places that people are going to keep working if they're not taken care of in that way. And you've seen what's happened with the economy and inflation. And if you're worried like, oh man, pastor's going to year-end giving bonus himself. I don't bonus myself. There's a team who not on staff here, a team of financial professionals that are members here, our financial advisory team. They set my salary. They deal with my compensation. So this has nothing to do with me. So if you want to help take care of our staff, I'm trying to get $25,000 together to provide bonuses for 7 people. You can look at our pay ranges, all that stuff. You can talk to our financial advisory team if you want. It took us about 4 or 5 years to get to the place where everybody on staff at our church was getting paid the average amount for a church of our size. So we are relatively low-paying church staff in terms of the church world, and I think we have a pretty exceptional staff personally. And so my man, Sage Williams, first year on staff, he's been doing a great job. And so we really want to take care of them. The second thing is buildings. And there's been a weird thing that's happened in the last 50 years of being a Christian in America, where we've divorced the idea of a building from being, for the building being a part of the mission. And it might be helpful for you to think about our facility as more of a community center than a church building. And so this building, it's a historic building, and we're trying to use it to take care of the neighborhood, to bless the neighborhood. And so there's something going on in this building pretty much every day of the week. Obviously, Sundays, we have our Sunday gatherings. A couple weeks ago, we hosted a conference, Love Thy Nerd conference. Some of you were here, bringing people in from all over the country to hear what does Jesus have to say about nerd culture. And I don't know if you guys were in the service when those people were here, but I wish they would move here and stay here. It was fun when they were here. We have a monthly swing dance where we teach people in the neighborhood how to swing dance, and people from our church, I don't know if you know that, a monthly game night where you can bring your kids or come and play board games or learn new games. 6 months of the year, we host Fresh Stop Market, which provides fresh, local, organic food to our neighborhood. It's the largest in our region, the largest Fresh Stop Market in our region meets out of this building. We run community events like Trunk or Treat, Vacation Bible School. We put in significant resources to our playground to turn that into a neighborhood playground. So pretty much every night of the week, you'll see people either playing basketball in our parking lot or playing with their kids in our playground. And the point is we want this to be a community center. We want to be generous with our building. Maybe you've had a baby shower here. Maybe you've had a birthday party here. And the reality is part of stewardship of this building as a community center means we're going to have to spend money to take care of it. Part of that, the bricks were bowing over there, and bowing bricks leads to collapsing bricks. And our option was, should we have bricks collapse on our children, or should we take care of our building, right? And to make sure those bricks didn't collapse over there, we spent $40,000. Have you guys ever heard the aircraft carrier take off in our parking lot over the summers? You know what I'm talking about? Or have you ever been here in the middle of summer and you're like, why didn't we turn the air conditioning on? And we're never like, oh, we're not that dumb. We're a little dumb, but we're not that dumb. We had a company come and give us a quote. What's it going to cost to modernize that system so we can do things like turn air conditioning on consistently? And at some point, we will need to address that, and that's $130,000. We got a 5-digit bill. Our building used to be in code because of sprinklers, and now our building is not in code, and that's a 5-digit bill to go address the sprinklers to keep our building in code. And the reality is it's a 100-year-old building, and there's constantly things that we're going to need to do to take care of it, and we see it as part of our mission. So we're hoping to raise a chunk. We don't have like this immediate project, but we know it's coming. There's always going to be something. We cut into savings. Thanks be to God, we had the $40,000, didn't affect our budget to pay for that, and we want to be a wise church. And when we hand this building off to our kids one day, we want it to be in good shape, and we don't want them freaking out about how to pay for bills. And I don't know, somewhere down the road, wouldn't it be nice if this room didn't look like a gym? I don't know. Is that too petty of me? So if you're bored and have like $100,000 and you're like, let's make this room not look like a gym anymore. Let's talk. We could do it. So that's that. Then the second thing, so buildings, bonuses. If you want to contribute to that, you can write year-end giving in a check, or on the app, there'll be a pull-down menu. You can hit year-end giving, and it'll all go towards that. The second thing, next week begins our journey through Advent. And we have a book out on the welcome table called Heaven and Nature Sing by Hannah Anderson. And Hannah is a brilliant lady. She's a great friend of our church, a great friend of Harbor Network, which is the church planting network that we're a part of. And her husband, who's helping me learn how to bird watch, he did all of the illustrations in it, and it's just beautiful. I like books that aren't just good to read, but they're beautiful to hold and beautiful to look at. And it's Advent reflections on the goodness of creation, on the presence of God, the nearness of Him. And so we wanted to make that available to you so that starting next week, you could make that part of your Advent journey. So that's at the welcome table if you would like. Now, kind of the core of what I want you to hear this morning in Hebrews 3. Something that may seem obvious to you, but I'm going to say it a lot over the next 15 minutes or so. It is difficult to be what you already are. It's difficult to be what you are. When I got hired to do what I'm doing right now, to be the primary preacher here at Sojourn Church, New Albany, I had preached about 5 sermons. Based on job description, vocation, I was a preacher. I signed a sheet of paper that said, you are a preacher. If you came and you listened to any of those initial 75-minute long sermons, you may not have been so convinced. Just because I had the job title of preacher doesn't mean I was a preacher. Do you remember the first job you really cared about? You show up day one and you are the thing, and then you realize how hard it is to be the thing? It's hard to be what you already are. You fall in love and you date somebody for a long time, and then in like 8 seconds, you go from being two individuals to I now pronounce you man and wife. You are a husband, but fellas, it's difficult to be what you are. Amen? Ladies, amen. Right? It's both of us. It's not, I'm just saying, it's hard to be what you already are. The doctor says, it's a girl. You're a dad. It's hard to be what you are. Just because he says you're a dad doesn't mean you know how to be a father or a mother. It's hard to be what you already are. Another way to put it is just because you are something doesn't mean you're experiencing that the way it was meant to, or you're being all that you could be in that. Dads are not supposed to be harsh and domineering, but it's difficult to be what you are. Moms are not supposed to be cold and controlling, but it's difficult to be what you are. Marriages are supposed to be mutual, participatory, a shared life together, marked by intimacy and safety and satisfaction. But boy, is it tough to be what you already are. Last week we said the church is one holy, apostolic family. And I'm here this morning to tell you it's difficult to be what we already are. Some of you, what I'm about to say, I have to say because we've unintentionally created some anxiety amongst the people of God here over the last few weeks. Some of you may notice that the pulpit is not in the center of the stage anymore. Have you noticed this? Sage Williams built that table, by the way. He came up, he's like, hey, I'm building something. You guys want to check it out? You should come check it out and then say something sweet to Sage later. So we have this table in the middle of our stage now, and communion feels different. So why? Well, we're not becoming Catholic, and I don't trust any government near enough to become Anglican. God help us. So we're not going Anglican. So what's the deal? Okay. You can go back and listen to 5 years of sermons if you want and hear that we've been saying this to you over and over and over again in different ways. The Christian life is a combination of profession of faith and possession of faith, meaning we believe some things to be true, and then we live in light of how these things shape us. Christianity was never meant to be just a lifestyle, and it was never meant to be just a confession of truth. So we have a confession of faith and a possession of faith. Truth helps us to live well, and living well helps us experience the goodness of truth. Jesus says to Peter, who do you say that I am? Do you trust me, Peter? And then he says to Peter, walk out on the water. You know, there's both you see in the life of Jesus, to say true things, but then also to live in light of what's true. So, for years now at our church, we've been saying the center of the Christian life is not somebody talking to you for 75 minutes in a service. So our sermons have gotten continually shorter. We're trying to make the services more experiential and participatory. And then it's like, what's one way we could make it clear that a sermon is not the ultimate destiny of all humans? We could stop putting the pulpit in the middle of the stage, which Christians have done for like 2,000 years. What could we put in the center of the service? The great tradition that Christ gave to us that symbolizes our mystical union with him. What is the center of the Christian faith? We've been telling you this for 5 years at least. Union with Christ, our experience of relationship with Jesus is at the center of the Christian faith. So what are we going to do? We're going to move communion physically into the center of the service. We're going to slow down there and spend more time there to enjoy it, that we might learn more of what it means to be united with Christ and with one another. Because you have to practice what you know. Just because you are something doesn't mean you're living that way. We are united with Christ. We do have peace with one another. So what do? We kind of awkwardly say hi to each other every morning to remember we're one and we belong to each other. So here in Hebrews 3, we get these real simple rhythms of how we can go about practicing what we already are. Last week, there's a rest available to us, a ceasing from the works of the law. We don't have to prove ourselves to God anymore because we're one holy apostolic family. If we want to experience what that means, if we want to live into the fullness of that, what will we do? So real simple. I don't usually preach this way, and I'm kind of excited to this morning. 3 simple words for you. Tell the truth, endure, and listen. Tell the truth, endure, listen. We tell the truth to maintain our unity. We endure to root ourselves in our apostolic calling. And we listen eagerly to promote our holiness. In verse 12, did you hear? The preacher said, "Be careful then, dear brothers and sisters. Make sure that your own hearts are not evil and unbelieving, turning you away from the living God." What does it look like to be careful? How do we actually do this? We're going to tell the truth. We're going to endure hardship, and we're going to listen. We're going to make these regular rhythms of our lives so that our hearts aren't turned from the Lord, and we can stay tender and sensitive. So verse 13, "You must warn each other every day while it's still today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against God." You must warn each other every day while it's still today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against the truth. Warn here has some really beautiful flavor. It means to come alongside, to support. Think about a friend holding your arms up. Some of us have really bad experiences with this, or you come from a church, or you think of Christians as those who go around telling everybody what to do. I was going to make you guys raise your hands or something, but don't do it. You know if that's you. You grew up in a tradition that when you think of Christians, you think of people that tell you what you're supposed to do. This warning here, it's not an invitation to speak the truth to hold people back, but to spur them forward. It's not to condemn, but to encourage. It's to come to somebody's aid. It's a concerning word birthed from love. It's a reminder that if we're going to hold firmly to the truth, we're not going to be able to do it alone. We have to be a family that tells the truth. And our truth-telling must be born of love, not out of condemnation, not out of a desire to control, but because we belong to one another, we need one another, and sin is deceitful. So we tell the truth, so that we won't be deceived by sin and hardened against God. We tell the truth to encourage each other towards the good things of God. It's one way that we maintain our unity as the church. Now, perhaps some of you will say things like, "Well, judge not lest ye be judged." Or we'll say things like, "I don't want to get in anybody else's business. I don't want to tell somebody what to do." You ever said that? You ever felt that way? And that's, minding your own business is biblical. 1 Thessalonians 4, make a dream to live a quiet life. Work with your hands. Mind your own business. You've got a verse for that. When I say tell the truth, I'm not saying let's all put our sin glasses on and be like, who's going to get it today? Or you just sit back there looking for someone to tell they're doing wrong. It's more like this. So the pastors went away to talk about some stuff over the last few days out in Brown County, Unionsville. We were at Lake Lemon. I didn't know it existed. It was wonderful. And on the drive back there, if you've ever driven around Brown County, Nashville, it's just curves and roads and hills, curves and hills. And there's one real sharp 90-degree turn, and then it was like turn, hill, train track, hill. And the reason I stopped is because a train was blowing its horn. And, that was like 8 seconds away from getting smashed. But I heard the train horn. What this is talking about is you see somebody that's a member of your family standing on the train tracks. And if you saw that happening and you knew that they weren't aware that the train was coming, would you sit back and say, "I'm just going to mind my own business. I don't want to be one of those Christians." You would say, hey, train, right? Train. Why? Well, because I would prefer them not to get hit by a train. So when it says to tell one another the truth, when we talk about cultivating this as a value in our family, it's because we don't want to see each other get crushed by trains. Or to put it in the language here of Hebrews 3, we don't want to see each other's hearts get hardened and deceived by sin and turned away from God. So because we love one another, we tell each other the truth. We believe the scriptures. In Proverbs 14, it says there's a way of living that seems right to a man, but it leads to death. The implication there is there's things that we're going to do that will seem like good ideas. And we're going to need somebody that says, "Hey, brother, hey, sister, boy, I love you so much, and I think this is a I think this is a bad idea. Proverbs 18 says, he who isolates himself seeks his own pleasure. Look out for your friend that doesn't hang out anymore. Look out for the person in your life that's slowly pulling away from community. And tell them the truth. Now, we have to be a family that tells the truth to maintain our unity. That being said, I promise you, most people don't like the truth. This is a cultural phenomenon right now. Sociologists will say we're a post-truth society. But listen, like most kids, your children, if you have them, don't like being told the truth. And have you ever said to your kid, don't raise your hand now. I've said this to my kid, but just to answer in your spirit. Have you ever said to your kid, I want you to listen and obey the first time, every time? Something like that? I say that. I've said that to my kids. And lately when I say that, I hear the Lord say to me, you something else. Like, we don't like being told the truth. Your kids fuss and fight, and you say, listen and obey. And then we fuss and fight when God says it, or when your friend comes and says something difficult to you, and you get defensive and want to put your guard up. Even when it's born of love, telling the truth is hard, and it rarely works the first time. And so there's an invitation that follows in verse 14. If we're faithful to the end, trusting God just as firmly as when we first believed, comma, he's going to say something awesome after that. So remember, he's preaching to a worn-out congregation, finding all kinds of ways to tell them to hold on. And he's saying, you're going to have to hold on as you're warning one another. You're going to have to be faithful. Why? Because the life of faith is a hard and narrow road. If anyone told you otherwise, I am sorry. But following Christ is the narrow road, and life will feel long and hard at times. Not all the time, but sometimes. Sin and suffering will tempt us to doubt God's goodness and faithfulness. There'll be prayers you pray that you wait to hear answers to. There'll be desires you long for, and sometimes it piles up year after year, and your hearts grow hardened because we're deceived into thinking that God will do what we want when we want it. And the preacher is saying, brother, sister, endure. Endure the hardships. Remain faithful to the end, just as Jesus did. Just as Jesus did as an act of trust. We have to be a family that endures to stay rooted in our apostolic calling. Have you noticed how suffering makes it tempting, at least, to turn away from God? Maybe you had a crazy life, and you start following Jesus, and then it gets a little bit tough, and your crazy life starts sounding kind of like the Israelites when they wished they could go back to Egypt. I mean, sometimes it can get so tempting that, like Israel, slavery sounds better than freedom. There will be times where life is difficult, and the call is to endure so that we can stay rooted in our apostolic calling, standing on the shoulders of Jesus, enduring to become like Jesus. That's the apostolic calling, and we endure because of what he's promised. So he says, if you hold on to the end, comma, listen, verse 14, we will share in all that belongs to Christ. Not, you will finally not be in trouble anymore. The promise of endurance, the promise of staying faithful, is you get to share in everything that belongs to Christ. Now, respond to this, please. What belongs to Jesus? Everything. So maybe I'm the only one excited about this. The last service was very unenthusiastic about that, too. And so, I don't know what that means exactly. But take a second to think about, what are you into? What makes your heart beat fast? What do you like to do with your free time? And what is something that you enjoy that belongs to Jesus? The promise of staying faithful to him to the end is that you get to share in that. Are you into waterfalls? Are you into dinosaurs and woolly mammoths? Are you into galaxies and space? Are you into cooking and architecture? Are you into music? I don't know what you're into. But whatever it is, it belongs to Jesus. And the promise of staying in his family of faithfulness is we get a share in all of that. If you want to experience the gift of being one holy apostolic family, you must become a person that tells the truth and endures. We're not going to go hunting for suffering and hardship, but when it comes, we're going to be a people that endure. Every one of us. I don't like what I'm about to say, but what I'm about to say is true. Every one of us will get a turn on the roller coaster of suffering. Just period. Every one of us will get a turn. You need to decide, will you suffer like a member of this family? Will you endure hardship like a Christian? Will you learn how to endure together? Will we learn how to share in one another's hardships as we share in the sufferings of Christ? It's hard to be what we already are. But if you want it, if you're willing to risk it, if you want to share in all things, tell the truth and endure. And I just find that to be such a lovely motivation. To desire something good, to trust God's promises, is so much lighter and freer than thinking we have an angry God making every checkbox of will we or won't we, are we or aren't we. The works of the law have been put to rest because Christ put them in a grave. We're free, we're loved, and we're forgiven. We are one holy apostolic family. And if you want to experience the freedom and joy of what that means, we'll tell the truth, we'll endure, and finally we'll listen. Verse 15, today when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts as Israel did when they rebelled. God speaks to you, so when you hear his voice, listen. We have to become a people that listen better than we do, both to God and to each other. I cannot put into words how much pain, heartache, tragedy could have been avoided in the life of this church if we were a people that knew how to listen. Listen to a spouse, listen to a friend, listen to a pastor. So I want to remind you, we are a people saved by grace, which means we can lay down our defensiveness. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything somebody says about you or thinks about you, but it does mean there's space for you to at least be curious about it. So when a friend comes and says something to you, when they're trying to tell you the truth, we can at least try to be curious about it. I really want our church to become experts in phrases like, tell me more, or could you help me see that? Could you help me understand that? You could even kind of initiate that stuff and ask people things like, how do you experience me? If you want to be really dangerous, or maybe really transformative in your relationships, you could ask somebody, what's something about me I need to see that you think I don't see? What's something about me that you think I need to see that I don't see? So fundamentally, if we are going to become a people that value listening, we assume that we don't see ourselves clearly all the time in every way. And because we're saved by grace, it's okay. I have nothing left to prove because I'm eternally secure, eternally loved. And that allows me to say, I want to be healthy and better more than I want to be right. And so I can lay down my defenses and listen. And listen, our family is different. This family is not built on striving for power or position. This family is not a competition to see who gets to be on the highest platform. We are a holy, that's what holy means. You're set apart, we're different. We are a holy, apostolic, unified family. And we just won't always see it by ourselves. We have to listen to each other. And this is the last thing I have to say to you this morning. Some of you have been Christians far too long for the voice of God to feel as distant and unfamiliar as it does. And what I mean by that is if someone asked you, when's the last time you heard God speak to you? I'm guessing most of us would be like, that sounds super weird, bro. I don't know why our culture says bro. It's so weird. Bro. It's like a weird Christian thing. Bro. Sorry. Making fun of people. This might be helpful to some of you. We relate to God the same way we relate to other people. And I want you to imagine what a friendship would be like or what a marriage would be like if, like, once a week you called somebody and you were like, friend of my youth of all the days, oh, my friend, here's the 37 things I really need you to do for me. Talk to you tomorrow. And you just fire hosed things you wanted them to do for you for 5 to 15 minutes. Or you only called them when you were in an emergency. And you do that for like 20 or 30 years. And you're like, I don't know about all this Christianity stuff, God feels so far away. Do you see what I'm saying? If you never listen to God, you will never hear the voice of God. Well, how do you listen to God? You stop talking. You do something like this. Here's what listening to God looks like. That's it. If you want to be very spiritual about it, you could say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." It's a very biblical prayer. And take 5 minutes and be quiet. If you're here and you're feeling stuck this morning, take 6 months and say, every morning I'm going to say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And I'm going to strive to listen for 5 to 10 minutes. If you did that for 6 months, you would be a different kind of human. So we make space to listen to our friends and our family, and we make space to listen to God. And so we have our rhythms of rest. How do we experience the rest of God as the rest of his church? This freedom from the works of the law. How do we become one holy apostolic family? We tell the truth to maintain our unity. We endure hardship to root ourselves in our apostolic calling, and we listen well to promote holiness. You are one holy apostolic family, but it's hard to be what you are. So we'll tell the truth, we'll endure, and listen. Let's pray.